But for years, I had the pleasure of watching Lucy at cabarets and really be a rock star. So, okay, but yes, of course you've played those musical parts and you're fantastic in them, but any chance you might be a rock star?
No, I don't think so. When I get my band, though, it's going to be called Mid-LC, Midlife Crisis.
All right, so you had a great teacher. You went to NTS, you went to National Theatre School?
Yes, I did. I went to National Theatre School. Before that, I did, in Quebec, of course, you do 2 years at CEGEP instead of the last 2 years of high school. And while I was there, I met Bernie Hopkins, who's a long-standing member of this company. And I would sneak into all the university courses, and I was in all their plays and everything. No one seemed to mind too much. And then I went to the National Theatre School, and where my father actually had been the Director General for many years. And in fact, one of the reasons we emigrated to Canada from England, I was born in England, the reason we emigrated was because Michel Saint-Denis, who founded the National Theatre School and the Juilliard School, came to my father. He was a stage manager at Covent Garden Opera House, and asked him to come to Montreal. And so, and here we are today. You know, I mean, it's quite neat.
For any theatre school students out there, the name she's just mentioned, Michel Saint-Denis, of course, an enormous influence on the second half of the 20th century, and also an enormous influence on the National Theatre School, and by extension, the Stratford Festival.
A lot of theatre school students have been through here and are still here and will come through here.
So now, you got out of theatre school. Was your first job in the park?
Yeah, Dream in High Park in the first season, and so Poison Ivy and people wandering through the set because they didn't know what was going on, and dogs and airplanes and mosquitoes and.
Now I was in the second year.
I know you were in the
second
year.
So you'd cleared out all the Poison Ivy. The winos were all gone. It was very civilized by the time I did.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
And then how did Stratford come along?
I went from there. I went on the Globe School Tour. There's the Globe Theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan. Used to have a school tour that I don't think it does anymore, but where every student in the whole of Saskatchewan would see a play at least once every 3 years, meaning a lot of them would see them every year, but they'd fly actors up to all the reservations and way up north and all that stuff, and often there was a Shakespeare or something like that done, and like 3 little plays for three different school ages sort of thing. And while I was on the tour, I met with John Hirsch, who was doing an audition tour, and we met in the lobby of the Saskatoon CP Hotel.
Yes, okay.
And I was all excited about playing Scrabble the dog, and how great it was. And then I got a call to come and be in the Young Company.
And the Young Company was John Neville's Young Company at that time?
It was the first year that I was there was Michael Langham's Young Company.
Oh, right, okay.
And then
this was '84.
That's right. And then the next year, John Neville was in charge of the Young Company, incumbent to taking over as artistic director. So it was kind of a way to sort of segue that for him to being around and stuff like that.
Right. Great guy. Wonderful man.
Yeah.
Okay, so now in this season you're playing the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, and you're getting to play Grumio.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the nurse first.
Okay.
So here are 2 young kids, and in many ways, even though they're the young people in the play, they're kind of the grown-ups. I mean, both of them get advice. They get advice, and Juliet gets advice from the nurse, who does the best she can and tries to guide her, but things quickly come off the rails. Let's talk about the nurse and what helped you understand what she was about and what her background is and how she fits into this household.
I think fundamentally the first thing that I hooked up with was that she is a servant in the household, and that comes with a certain amount of power and non-power. And I really believed that that was a little key into when she's speaking, and even more importantly when she's not speaking, and how she lives in that slightly skew-if, off-the-rails household. She is completely devoted. And the second thing I would do, of course, is completely zero in on Juliet.
Right.
And Shakespeare gives the nurses, any actress playing the nurse, this fantastic little snippet of information where she says that her daughter is dead, Susan, and her husband is dead. So, I mean, that's a lot of information in very small, like in 2 lines. You find out a lot about this woman, and that's a good place to start. So you start from that loss, and the idea that she is, I assume, alone except for Juliet. And so she invested, like any mother, maybe single mother might, being Juliet's wet nurse, she invested everything she lost into the gaining of Juliet. And so I think she lives and breathes for Juliet. And
the household has its own problems. He said it's slightly dysfunctional. I mean, the father is obviously, you know, interested in power, very, very emotional. You know, it's all about ego in a way. And the mother doesn't seem to be nearly as kind of committed to Juliet as the nurse is.
Well, she certainly can't communicate to Juliet the way the nurse does. And in fact, early on in the scene, the clip that was shown, you know, she comes to give Juliet some pretty big news, which is it's your coming out party tonight,
right.
And not only that, let's zero in on Paris, you know, as a potential beau. And but when she goes to start to say that, she actually can't be alone with Juliet and say that. Like she suddenly, for whatever reason, has to have the nurse there as a kind of support, or maybe she just can't look her own daughter in the eye for whatever reason. And I think, but mostly that has to do with just not knowing Juliet very well.
Right. And
how she might react to something.
So, on the one hand, you are a servant. On the other hand, you are almost the mother of Juliet.
The mother.
You're the person that she probably most trusts.
Yeah, and the other thing that that Nikki James, who plays Juliet, pointed out early on, she said that the thing also about the nurse and Juliet is that the nurse is the only contact that Juliet has with the outside world. Like the only way she gets news is if the nurse brings it to her.
Right.
And that's a pretty interesting codependency as well. I think that is pretty important. And also Juliet's, I mean, she's a feisty girl, right? I mean, you don't actually, and maybe that's one of the reasons, you know, Mrs. Capulet can't, like, because you go, we don't know how she's going to react, because she's pretty sharp and fiery and all those things that maybe that is getting a little bit hard to handle. You know, any young girl of that age is maybe a bit of a handful.
As much of a handful that she is, you support her in you know, because I could tell from your reading of A Man of Wax that perhaps you're feeling Paris isn't quite good enough and she should go after Romeo as she wants to do.
I think it's more to the point, because they haven't even met Romeo at that point. I think that for the nurse, it's more about, you know, finding the right man, you know? Like, don't, you know, Paris, she's seen Paris, she knows Paris, she goes, oh, he's not good enough for my Juliet, you know, and that you know, and her own experience, her life experience is, one assumes, the way she refers to her husband in a very loving way, that she had a good marriage with a good man, you know, who had a lot of spirit and told dirty jokes and all that sort of thing. And I think that's what she wants for Juliet, I think, is someone that is the right person, rather than just you know, the match that is socially and politically more important.
So, but when things come off the rails, she has this horrible moment where you portray so brilliantly, Lucy, where she realizes that the pressure is too great, and that Juliet must give in and marry Paris, and that's a horrible moment. It's a bit of a death, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think, I mean, the key, one of the keys to that for me is the scene just previous to that, when Mr. Capulet, Lord Capulet, loses his mind and threatens to throw Juliet out on the street and disown her. Well, you know, I guess if she goes, nurse goes, I don't know. I mean, but I think the thing for the nurse is her frame of reference, and she's lived without a man that she loved. She has actually lived without a man that she loved for a long time, I assume. And I think that probably of all the things that she believes is a terrible tragedy is to be alone. And so she thinks she's doing the best for Juliet in that, and she says, I mean, you know, Romeo might as well be dead, which is her reference, I think her frame of reference is, it's better to have a husband to look after you and to get you through the, you know, that part of your life, than not have anything at all, which would happen if she was out on the street. Because, and that's, I think she believes that to be absolutely true, and that's her life experience that she's bouncing off.